Hi, welcome to my talk. I'm Jonas, working for Eclipse Source. We are a company supporting our clients in building custom IDEs and custom domain-specific tools of all kind. And nowadays, 80% of these tools are web-based, building on platforms like Eclipse Theia and VS Code. And today I would like to talk about Eclipse Theia, a very exciting project these days. And the goal of my talk today will be to get you started with this project. I want to provide an introduction, answer the most frequently occurring questions for newcomers on the project, and ideally, within the next 25 minutes, give you a better picture of what Theia can do for you. All right, let's directly jump into it and start with the most important question. What is Eclipse Theia, in case you have never heard of it? Theia is a platform for building web-based tools and IDEs. The tools that you build on Theia can either run on the desktop, classic desktop tools, or in the cloud, and then you use them via the browser. A platform means it's really a project that you can use to build your own tools. What does such a platform consist of? There are many things. I would like to focus on the three most important pieces or building blocks. The first thing that Theia provides you with is a basic workbench frame. You probably know that from other frameworks like Eclipse Desktop, for example. So you have a window layout in which you can place existing views or custom views. You have menus, you have preferences, a quick access bar, a code editor, and everything is nicely integrated with these others. So you have something to get started with, and it's very little effort to come up with the first version of the tool. A second and very important part is a modular extension mechanism. This is actually the enabler to build custom tools based on something existing, because it allows you to take existing components like, I don't know, a file explorer, existing code editor, and then add your own stuff on top of that, combine everything together, and build a custom tool. Along with this modular extension mechanism, it also provides quite a lot of existing features that you can just reuse. I just mentioned the file explorer, there's Git support, there's a terminal, outline view, and so on. So with very little effort, you can just reuse standard components that are often needed or required in tools, and then just add the domain-specific things that you need to add on top for your domain or for your tool project. Now, maybe one of the interesting questions, how does this relate to VS Code? Because it all sounds very similar, but there are some key differences that I would like to highlight. But I would like to start with the similarities, because there are actually a lot. And that's not by accident. Theia is heavily inspired by VS Code. And I want to explicitly mention, so we do a lot of projects on Theia, but we also do a lot of projects based on VS Code. And it really depends on the goal of a project, which solution is better. And hopefully, after this part of the presentation, you have a better picture on that. So Theia is heavily inspired by VS Code. That is, and if you look at a Theia vanilla application without any customization, it looks almost the same as VS Code. So in a standard Theia distribution, most people would not even notice that they use Theia instead of VS Code. And that is even stronger because Theia reuses quite a lot of VS Code technology, and the kind of the best pieces of VS Code are used in Theia. Most obvious example is the Monaco code editor. That's the code editor used in Theia, working with LSP, so you can install language servers to support all different kind of languages. It's a very advanced code editor. It's the same in VS Code as in Theia. The usability concept I just mentioned, for example, the quick access bar and a lot of other stuff like commands, it's all the same. And the reason for that is when Theia was created after VS Code was done to add some advantages basically to it. But the usability concepts in VS Code are great. It's worth mentioning is that we are talking about the standard usability concept of Theia. And Theia, you can adapt it quite a bit depending on your own project requirements. And last but not least, Theia supports VS Code extensions. So all the extensions that you know that you can install in VS Code, you can actually also install in a Theia-based tool, which provides access to this huge ecosystem of tool additions, and you can use them in a custom tool based on Theia too. Now, what are the differences? Because there must be some differences. And I would like to start on a high level before I talk about some details. So the main difference is actually the purpose. VS Code is an extensible code editor. That's its purpose, and it does a great job in being that. That means it's a tool that you can download, and then you can extend it with some extensions to certain limits. You can do everything that the creators of VS Code allow you to do via this extension API. And the purpose is to just use the tool, extend it, but that's it. Now, Theia, in contrast, is not a tool. It is actually a platform for you to build your own code editors, IDEs, or even tools. And that raises quite a lot of different requirements compared to a tool. So and that also creates quite some confusion when people get in contact with Theia because they just want to download it. You cannot just download Theia. You download or use a tool that is based on Theia. And there are quite a lot of tools based on Theia already. So different vendors adopt Theia to build their own tools. I will have a longer list on the next slide. One thing to highlight is that Theia itself as a project also provides a tool called Theia Blueprint, which is kind of the vanilla Theia distribution. It's a demonstrator. It shows how the platform can be used. It's also a usable tool. So in a sense, Theia Blueprint would be comparable to VS Code, although it doesn't target the same mass audience as VS Code, at least at the moment. Now, I promised you some examples for tools that are based on Theia. I will not go into detail about all the examples here, but as you can see, we have quite some the who is who in the software industry here on the slide, like SAP, ARM, Google, Red Hat. I would like to highlight the last four because there are a lot of details available on those. Eclipse Theia Blueprint, as I mentioned, that's a tool that you can just download and use. So if you want to try Theia or build an own tool based on Theia, that's a good starting point. Logic Cloud by Logicals is a very interesting solution for systems engineering. And there's a extensive adopter story about this project that you find under this link if you go to the slide. Same is true for Arduino. So probably everybody knows Arduino, and then the new Arduino IDE 2.0 is based on Theia. And there's also an adopter story available about this. And you can also download the tool because it's available in beta. And finally, this one is another demonstrator that shows the full power of Theia called Coffee Editor. It shows how you can actually build really domain-specific tools in Theia, including diagrams, custom form-based views, DSLs, and so on. So integrate everything nicely in the workbench. This tool is available as an online demonstration, so you can just click a link and then use the tool for demonstration purposes. Right. So to complete on that, what are the unique selling points of Theia as a platform? So what makes it special as a platform compared to just using a tool? There are two main points. The first one is flexibility. And that is really, if you build something on Theia, you have a lot of flexibility to adapt the platform to your own needs. So there are hardly any requirements that you cannot fulfill with Theia. And that's enabled because Theia, the core of Theia has a modular architecture. So everything in Theia is implemented as a module, and you can use the API of these modules to adapt something, but you can also replace these modules with your own solution to really white label Theia, remove existing stuff, do basically everything you can imagine you want to do with a platform. Just to give you three examples, there would be many examples, but I would like to focus on three simple things what you can do with such a platform. As for example, if you want to have a toolbar in your tool, like for example the Arduino IDE has, that's very simple to do in Theia. You have access to the DOM element, you can just add it. Besides, Theia already provides a toolbar out of the box that you can basically just add to your product, and then you have support for that. Another area where the platform is very powerful, if you have editors that are not Monaco text-based editors, but something different, like for example form-based editors, DSL editors, or even graphical editors. In Theia, you can integrate them very nicely and very deeply into the workbench, for example, with validation, with navigation to different parts, and you can also link views together very nicely to create a great UX in the domain-specific tool area. And as a third simple example, you can remove unwanted features. Why would you want that? Again, maybe Arduino is a good example. The key, I would say, success or the greatness of the Arduino tools are simplicity. So it's very easy to get started with them. And one part to achieve that is actually to remove everything that is not needed. And this is very easy in Theia. You can basically just turn features off or just remove them from your product. Not easy in an existing tool. The second unique selling point of group is openness and meritocracy. What does that mean? Theia is an Eclipse project, so it has a vendor-neutral governance. The Eclipse Foundation actually is governing this project and sets the rules how different contributors and adopters collaborate with each other. And all parts of Theia are fully open source. There's no proprietary part. This goes down to the OpenVSX marketplace that is used by Theia to install VS Code extension. Everything is open source. You can build a tool that is full stack building on open components, and you can change them. And as used from the Eclipse Foundation, it's all commercial friendly. So there are IP checks that ensure that there are no IP violations. The license, the Eclipse public license, allows for commercial use. So all the things that are important if you adopt an open source framework in a commercial context are actually there. Two examples again for what that means in practice. Support for detachable windows. So Theia is currently working on supporting detachable windows, a feature that has been requested in the web-based tool area for quite some time. Other tools decide, okay, they don't want this. In Theia, not a single party can decide, okay, we don't want to support that. The platform can decide if there are contributors that would like to enable this. It is going to happen. And currently, several vendors are actually even collaborating on implementing these features. And after that, when it's part of the platform, of the modular platform, every adopter has the choice whether to use this in their own custom tools or not. Second example is not even a feature one or a technical one. The development process itself is also community driven. So, for example, last year we adapted the process on the migration guide to ease the life for adopters. And at the moment, we are, for example, discussing the release cycle, the frequency of releases, also based on the needs of the adopters of this project to make their life easier and better address the needs. And these things are discussed in public, and you can influence them when you start to contribute to the project. So that's what meritocracy means. If you start to contribute to the project, you can build influence and basically influence the direction of the project. Excuse me. All right. I mentioned before that Theia supports VS Code extension, and I also mentioned that Theia has a very modular core, and I quickly would like to dive into the Theia architecture, especially and highlight three key aspects that are very important for beginners that get started with VS Code. With Eclipse Theia. Now, the first thing is in Theia you actually have two different ways to extend Theia and add your own features to it. But before we look at Theia, let's look at VS Code first, because that's important to understand the difference here. So what VS Code basically does, it provides one tool that is kind of working as a black box. And then there is an extension API provided, and you can write these VS Code extensions that interact with this API to add features, influence how the tool looks like. This is a great model for a tool like VS Code because these extensions are actually encapsulated. So a bad extension cannot harm the stability of the host tool. And also it's very easy because the API is limited, but it's well documented and easy to understand. The only disadvantage of this approach is that these extensions cannot just do anything here. They cannot access the internals, and they cannot, for example, remove stuff, or they're basically limited to what is provided in this extension API, which again has advantages and disadvantages. Theia, on the other hand, has a fundamentally different approach. In Theia, the core itself is modular, and it consists of so-called Theia extensions. So everything in Theia is such a Theia extension, and they all play by the same rule. That means if you build a tool based on Theia, you use Theia extensions that are provided by the framework, but you also can build your own Theia extensions, and they have full access to the internal API. And that's where you can really do everything, remove stuff, change the workbench layout, whatever you can imagine. And that makes Theia so flexible. And now to complete the picture, and that's why I actually added this here to the slide, Theia also supports alternatively the VS Code approach. So Theia also provides this limited API, and it does that for two reasons. One is you can reuse all the existing VS Code extensions that are out there. And second, especially if you allow third parties to extend your tool, this is the better architecture because it's encapsulated. And many tools use both approaches, typically providing a core of the tool using Theia extensions, because there you have the full power, and then allow it to be extended via VS Code extension, because this approach is better for runtime extensibility, especially from third-party vendors. All right, now let's switch over to how to get started with Theia. I would like to start with how a typical Theia-based project looks like in terms of what are the artifacts that you work with when you start with Theia. Essentially, the core artifact that you need is a product that you define, and this product specifies which Theia extensions and which VS Code extensions are part of your product. And these extensions can be existing extensions that you reuse, and it can be both. If you want to do that, you only need a product configuration that basically lists all the existing extensions that you combine, and then you can already build a Theia-based product without even writing any custom code. And it's a valuable approach. Maybe you just want to recombine some existing features and you're happy with that. If you want to add your own features, again, you can choose between Theia extensions and VS Code extensions, and then you add them via source code, so you really code them and add them to the product configuration, and then you can build your own tool. I would like to mention one architecture or high-level architecture aspect of Theia, and that's the split between front-end and back-end. That's important to understand. If you're familiar with other web-based tools, it's a pretty common architecture, but every Theia-based application is split into a back-end process, typically running on Node.js, and the front-end process that is rendered in the browser engine. So the front-end is the UI part, and the back-end contains the business logic and file access, for example. Now, the great thing about this architecture is that it allows a very flexible deployment. The most obvious deployment would be you put the front-end in the browser. So you access that via a browser, and the server is running on some remote location in the cloud. And then you have a classic cloud-based tool. However, you can also bundle both things together using Electron, because Electron has a browser engine for front-end rendering and can also run the backend. And then you can bundle everything together into a classic desktop tool that you can just download and install. Many adopting projects of Theia use this as a first option, interestingly, because the switch from an existing desktop tool to a web-based testing tool based on Theia is not so far. However, from this web-based desktop tool to a cloud-based solution, you don't have to re-implement the tool. You basically just have to deal with the cloud-based hosting, which is another topic on itself, but the tool or you don't have to recode your tool then again. So that's why this option is very interesting in the evolution of your tool. Now, how to get started with a Theia-based project. So what are the first steps if you really want to start coding? Theia provides a Yeoman generator. So that's a template scaffolding tool where you can generate template projects, including some example extensions and already running builds for Electron and browser applications. So it's a very efficient way to get started. You can have a running application within a minute. If you want to create a desktop installer or a desktop-based tool, you can also start with Eclipse Theia Blueprint, the tool I mentioned before. It's open source. It's part of the project, so you can just fork that or use it as a template to build your own desktop-based tool, including installers for all major operating systems. And that's a screenshot of Theia blueprint. Now, summing up with how to get started with Theia, I would like to provide some links to you. You might want to follow to read more about Theia. First is the online documentation, which has been heavily extended during the last year. So it covers really the most important aspects about the Theia API and how to implement features based on Theia. So definitely check this out. The Yeoman generator that I just mentioned to just create a Theia-based project. There is a very active forum in Theia. You can ask questions, you get answers within a very short time, and we are happy if you ask questions. So please go ahead. And there's another Eclipse Theia FAQ covering more questions that have fit in my talk today. I just mentioned the community forum. So how to get in contact with the community? Where can you talk to the people behind Theia? The community forum I already mentioned. You can raise issues in the GitHub repository. There is a weekly developer call, which is a super great event. You can just join there, especially if you're thinking about adopting Theia or you're in the process of doing so. You're invited to join there, introduce yourself, talk to the people, get an impression who's working on the project, discuss technical solution with others. It's happening every week. Just follow the link on the slide. And of course, we have events. Foremost, TheiaCon scheduled for November, and EclipseCon, where a lot of Theia committers and contributors will be, and a lot of Theia content is expected at EclipseCon too. Now, finally, how to contribute to Theia. Maybe you're already adopting it or thinking about that. The next step is hopefully to contribute to it. Of course, a project is only as strong as its contributions are. So what are contributions that we're looking for? Ask questions. You don't bug us with that. We want to learn what people are doing and what information they need. I'm really happy to answer that. If you can, also help us answering questions of other people, especially if you started with Theia like 2 months ago. There might be other people who just start who have exactly the same questions or similar questions that you just found out. So start to answer questions to others. That's a great contribution. Report bugs. We always want to know what's wrong, so we can fix that. That's always a valuable contribution. Tell us about feature requests. We cannot promise we will implement them. You can, of course, contribute something, but before you do so, tell us what you're missing. That's very interesting information for a project to strategically direct development resources. And then, of course, last but not least, you can contribute code by providing pull requests for bug fixes, feature implementation, missing tests, and even improving the documentation, which we're really happy that there are a lot of contributions about documentation, especially in the last year or month. It's worth mentioning that the Eclipse Foundation is governing the open source collaboration, which is great because the same rules apply to everyone. So if you, for example, contribute more, you might get elected as a committer. Everybody agrees to contribute under the same license. There are checks for that. So it's really a professional open source collaboration based on the processes provided by the Eclipse Foundation that are really stable and well proven for over 20 years and continuously improved and adapted. Yeah, my last slide. You're not alone. Theia has a great ecosystem of contributors and adopters. The list that you see on this slide is only the tip of the iceberg. That are the companies that we're aware of and that added the logo to the website. We know that there are more, definitely much more, but this is already an impressive list, I think. If you work with Theia, if you use Theia, if you adopt Theia, please let us know. Consider to add your company listed on the website, because the people working on Theia are always happy to find out about a new use case. So you're invited to do that. And with that, I would like to close my talk and take up any questions you might have around Theia. And I know I definitely did not cover all the questions. I tried to focus on the ones that I usually hear from beginners, but I hope there are more. Happy to take them. Right. We have some questions here already, so I will actually hurry up because we have a lot of them. So first question we received is, we are developing a VS Code extension. Some time ago, we tested it in Theia, and while most things work the same way, we did notice a few mainly graphical differences and glitches. Is it likely that these are just current bugs in Theia that eventually will be fixed for 100% compatibility with VS Code? So short answer, yes, probably. What would be really good if you find these small differences, to at least report them, that the project is aware, ideally contribute something, but we would be really happy if you take screenshots and basically let us know. Right. Second question. Sorry. Any killer upcoming features you're excited about? Can we see into your crystal ball? Maybe, yeah. So one thing that I already sneaked into this presentation, it's not officially announced at all, but there is a pull request open as the first step towards multi-window support, that you can actually detach views from the main window and move them to a secondary screen, for example. That is a feature I was personally missing since a long time when switching to web-based tools in general. And the cool thing, it works in Electron, but also in the browser, and you can really use your screen real estate again. It's a first step that we do there, but I think it's a good movement. Besides that, it is also worth mentioning that I would say a lot of features are currently developed around Theia, because the core platform is kind of getting into a more stable phase. But for example, in the cdt.cloud project that is based on Theia, a lot of additional domain-specific features, like, for example, a memory view, are currently contributed and developed. And I see a lot of new features, like more domain-specific features, coming up in these surrounding projects. Related question: which domains have adopted Theia? Yeah, so interesting question. I'm always surprised how many different domains need custom tools, and how different domains or various domains adopt Theia, really from completely different area, like finance, game industry, cloud computing in general, different use cases. Fortunately, I'm not allowed to tell many examples because they're customers with us and under NDA. Some public examples that you find on the website. In general, I would say a focus is currently in the embedded world. So tools for C, C++ development, and in general to program for embedded devices. This is traditionally an area where custom tools provide a lot of efficiency. And many vendors in this area are currently adopting Theia and provide great tools. And you can even, like for Arduino, ARM, Ericsson are examples, ST Microelectronics, who contributed. So this is definitely a focus area. And maybe as a last question, I'm not sure about the time. How does Theia compare to the Eclipse desktop tool platform, or RCP? Yeah, that's a good one. And so, I mean, we have adopted, especially at Eclipse Source, we have adopted the Eclipse tool platform, like for huge number of tools for a very long time, since 20 years already, almost 20 years. It is not deprecated. It's still there. It is maintained, and it will be maintained as long as there are projects on it. But I would say there's currently really a massive shift towards cloud-based tools, and Theia is kind of a very good candidate to move to. So I would claim, and we actually published even an article about that like 4 weeks or 5 weeks ago. I would claim that Theia can really be considered as the next generation of the Eclipse tools platform. And it really has reached this state to make this claim from my point of view. For RCP, it's a little bit different, because RCP, when you think about desktop application, you might switch them to pure web technology stack. But if you have something where you have a window layout preferences and it's more workbench-like application, it's a very nice fit for Theia. Because Theia is so flexible, you can just remove the IDE specific stuff and also do some RCP-like use cases with it. And I think with that, I used up all my time. I thank you very much for attending. And please feel free to get in contact with me if you have any more questions.